Hello hockey fans and welcome back to another video. Every year, 16 teams punch their ticket to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And while this format ensures that half of the league makes an appearance in the postseason, that doesn't mean that earning a spot is an easy task. After all, whether a bubble team goes on a surprising late season run, or a perennial contender is plagued by injuries all year long, even the strongest of teams can suffer notable setbacks that can make or break their postseason aspirations. While many cup contenders will ultimately fall before the final hurdle, the majority of teams who end up lifting the championship are able to do so after finally conquering their demons and overcoming several setbacks from past postseason runs. That said, this isn't always the case, as there have been several teams who were able to go all the way after missing the playoffs altogether the year prior. And in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the more recent examples. So in today's video, join me as we explore the NHL teams who went from playoff miss to cup champs. Let us begin with the oldest example in this video, which belongs to the 1991 Pittsburgh Penguins. Now it's safe to say that the Penguins of the mid to late 80s were nothing short of terrible. After all, the team had finished higher than 5th place in their division just once between 1983 and 1990, and had missed the playoffs 7 times in 8 seasons. After finally booking a trip to the 1989 Stanley Cup playoffs, and after being knocked out in the second round by their rival Philadelphia Flyers, the following 89-90 NHL season would end in disappointment once again. Despite being led by generational talent and future league legend Mario Lemieux, who registered an incredible 45 goals and 123 points in his first 59 games of the year, a back injury against the New York Rangers on February 14th, 1990 would take him out of the lineup for the rest of the season. As you might expect, this injury was a pretty huge blow to a Penguins team that was struggling to stay above 500 even with Lemieux in the lineup, and it put their playoff aspirations in serious jeopardy. While high-scoring defenseman Paul Coffey and forward John Cullen would attempt to fill the Lemieux-sized hole on the box score, and while goaltender Wendell Young tried his best between the pipes, the Penguins would struggle mightily down the stretch. In fact, the Penguins would win just 5 of their last 22 games after Lemieux's injury to finish the season with a 32-40-8 record, good enough for 5th place in the Patrick Division and 9th place in the Western Conference. If finishing one position out of the playoffs wasn't bad enough though, the Penguins would miss the postseason by a single point, as they finished 1 point behind the New York Islanders, who took the 4th seed in their division and the final playoff spot in the conference. Ooh, so close yet so far. Despite this brutal end to the season, Pittsburgh were determined to bounce back during the following 1991 season and finally return to the upper echelons of the sport. In order to do so, the Penguins' new general manager Craig Patrick made some notable changes to the team's front office, including hiring Bob Johnson as the team's new head coach, replacing Patrick himself, as well as naming Scotty Bowman as the director of player development and recruitment. Not only that, Patrick would also make some slight adjustments to the Penguins roster, including signing Paul Coffey to a multi-year extension and signing free agent Brian Trottier from the New York Islanders in order to add some more veteran leadership and championship pedigree to their relatively young core. While these various changes would bring a feeling of optimism around the organisation, the Penguins would be forced to begin the year without their captain, as Lemieux would continue to recover from his back injury and remain out of the lineup as a result. In fact, Lemieux would end up playing just 26 regular season games that year, but he would quickly return to his usual dominant form as he potted 19 goals and 45 points during that span. They really don't make them like Lemieux anymore, eh, folks? Though their superstar captain would miss most of the season, and though they would struggle to replace his production early in the year, some surprising performances from the unlikeliest of heroes would help the Penguins keep their head above water. Thanks to former 4th round draft pick Mark Recchi exploding onto the scene with one of his most productive seasons of his 22-year NHL career, fellow mid-round pick Kevin Stevens producing a breakout year of his own, Paul Coffey being Paul Coffey, and the reliable goaltending of emergent starter Tom Barrasso, the Penguins would win 10 of their first 20 games and 20 of their first 40 to produce a 20-17-3 record midway through the year. Oh, and they also received an impressive rookie season from a kid named Jaromir Jagr. You may or may not have heard of him over the last few years, he's kind of a big deal, you know. However, it wasn't until Lemieux finally returned to the lineup and Pittsburgh made some key trades that the team found their stride. After acquiring Larry Murphy from the Minnesota North Stars to add further scoring to their blue line, just before the trade deadline, the Penguins would complete a blockbuster deal, as they acquired Ron Francis, Ulf Samuelsson and Grant Jennings from the Hartford Whalers in exchange for John Cullen, Zali Zalapski and Jeff Parker. Though they had just traded their second highest scorer on the team, as well as the second most productive defenseman on the roster, this deal would work out very well for Pittsburgh, as Francis would score 11 points in 14 games after the deal, while Samuelsson and Jennings would register 5 points and 4 points respectively too. This production, coupled with Samuelsson and Jennings adding their fair share of grit, would help Pittsburgh finish the season strong, as the Penguins won 9 of their last 14 games after the trade to finish the year first place in the Patrick Division and third in the Wales Conference with a 41-33-6 record. Not only had they gone from 5th to 1st in their division in just a single season of play and had secured their second playoff berth in the last 3 seasons, Pittsburgh would end up going all the way. Thanks to a dominant performance by Lemieux, continued excellence by Recchi and Stevens, as well as strong performances by Murphy, Francis and Barrasso, the Penguins would defeat the Minnesota North Stars in 6 games in the finals to clinch the 1991 Stanley Cup. So thanks to the return of their superstar, a pair of breakout seasons and some effective mid-season acquisitions, Pittsburgh had just won their first championship in franchise history just a year after missing the playoffs completely. Sounds like a pretty good turnaround to me, folks. Oh, and Pittsburgh would go on to repeat their success the following year by clinching a second championship in 2 years, just in case you weren't impressed enough the first time around. Next up, let's take a look at the 1994 New York Rangers. Now, the Rangers of the late 80s and early 90s was the antithesis of the mid-80s Penguins. After all, New York had missed the playoffs just once between 1980 and 1992 and had made it past the first round on a number of occasions during this span. However, once the 92-93 NHL season rolled around, this playoff caliber performance was nowhere to be found. Despite the high-scoring talents of Captain Mark Messier, Tony Amonte and Mike Gartner, and despite being backstopped by standout netminder John Van Beesbroek, the Rangers finished rock bottom in the Patrick Division and 10th place in the Wales Conference with a 34-39-11 record. Not only that, this performance would lead to a change behind the bench, as head coach Roger Neilson was relieved of his duties midway through the season, despite just being handed a 3-year contract extension just a few months prior. Shortly after their abysmal season had come to an end though, Rangers general manager Neil Smith had found his new man, as he hired veteran coach Mike Keenan to replace interim bench boss Ron Smith on April 17, 1993. Known for being extremely tough on his players and having a limited shelf life with the team, Keenan's questionable coaching style was effective at getting short-term results, as he had taken each of his previous 2 teams all the way to the Stanley Cup finals, including a trip with the Chicago Blackhawks just a year prior in 1992. Soon after Keenan joined the team, New York would take the first steps towards massively overhauling their roster over the course of a lone season, as they traded starting goaltender John Van Beesbroek to the Vancouver Canucks on June 25th. While this move would raise plenty of eyebrows across the league, Van Beesbroek's departure allowed the starting job to open up for the Rangers' new rising star in net, Mike Richter. Safe to say this decision worked out in the long run, folks? With a new head coach behind the bench and a new starting netminder between the pipes, the Rangers would bounce back from their disappointing year prior and start the 93-94 season pretty strong. thanks to the continued production of Mark Messier and Adam Graves, the emergence of Brian Leetch and Sergei Zubov on the blue line, as well as the breakout play of Mike Richter, would help the Rangers win 5 of their first 10 games and 13 of their first 20, en route to a 27-11-3 record midway through the year. Though they would sit near the top of the league standings for much of the season, the team would make plenty of moves before the year was done. After a mid-November trade saw productive scorer Darren Turcotte and depth player James Patrick get sent to Hartford for Nick Kyprios and Steve Lama, just before the trade deadline on March 21st, the Rangers made a trio of pretty big moves, including sending high-scoring forward Tony Amonte to Chicago for Stefan Matteau and Brian Noonan, shipping off productive scorer Mike Gartner to Toronto for Glenn Anderson, as well as trading youngster Todd Marchant to Edmonton for Craig McTavish. Though they had dealt several impressive roster players elsewhere and had replaced them with experienced yet somewhat ageing veterans, these moves would work out very well. Thanks to their numerous additions helping the team become more well-rounded, and thanks to the core of the roster continuing their strong play, New York would win 8 of their 12 games post-deadline to finish the year first place in the Atlantic Division and first place in the Eastern Conference. If that wasn't impressive enough though, New York would also clinch the 1994 President's Trophy as the best team in the NHL during the regular season, thanks to their 52-24-8 record. Now that's how you rebound from a last place finish in your division. Though the President's Trophy curse had stopped several of the sport's greatest teams from lifting the cup, and though the Rangers had been suffering from a curse of their own since 1940, New York would finally conquer their demons and reach the promised land. Thanks to the continued excellence of Leetch and Messier, a breakout performance by Alexei Kovalev, as well as some clutch goals by Matteau and the goaltending heroics of Richter, the Rangers would eliminate the Vancouver Canucks in 7 games in the finals to clinch the 1994 Stanley Cup. Sure, they may have needed a plethora of 1980s Edmonton Oilers in order to help them go all the way, but winning your first cup in half a century and lifting a curse that had plagued your franchise for several decades sounds like a pretty successful year to me, folks. And finally, we'll conclude this video by looking at the most recent example, the 2006 Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the Hurricanes of the mid-2000s were more of a mixed bag than our previous 2 entries. After all, Carolina were able to clinch a playoff berth in consecutive seasons during this span, and they even made it all the way to the 2002 Stanley Cup Finals. But the Hurricanes would be unable to sustain this success, as they missed the playoffs in each of the next 2 years. While playoff caliber teams can miss the postseason for a number of reasons, Carolina weren't a playoff caliber team during the later years of this time frame. In fact, just 2 seasons after going all the way to the finals, Carolina would finish the 03-04 season 11th place in the Eastern Conference with a 28-34-14-6 record. If that wasn't bad enough though, the team's leading scorer that year ended up being Joseph Vasicek, who finished the season with 19 goals and 45 points in 82 games. You know your team isn't very good when not a single player reaches the 20-goal plateau and your star players struggle to produce at a point every 2 game pace. Now, this entry comes with a slight caveat, as the Hurricanes were unable to compete for a championship the year after their playoff miss, since the 04-05 lockout suspended play for the entire season. That said, once the NHL finally resumed play for the 05-06 season, Carolina would embark on one of the biggest turnarounds in league history. Having finished the 03-04 season well out of playoff contention, and with an extra year to evaluate their roster, the Hurricanes would make several notable changes before the NHL resumed play. Not only would they trade backup goaltender Artus Irby to Columbus and acquire fellow netminder Martin Gerber from Anaheim, Carolina would also sign free agent forward Corey Stillman to a 3-year contract on August 2nd, 2005. Add to that the team re-signing Ray Whitney to a 2-year contract, as well as drafting Andrew Ladd 4th overall in 2004, and the team had added some impressive pieces to a core already featuring productive forwards Rod Brindamore and Eric Cole, notable blue liners František Kaberle and Brett Hedigan, as well as rising stars Eric Staal and Justin Williams. Once the lockout finally ended and the 05-06 NHL season commenced, the Carolina Hurricanes would hit the ground running. Thanks to Eric Staal exploding onto the scene during his sophomore year, Stillman making an immediate impact on the box score, and thanks to Williams registering the most productive season of his entire NHL career, Carolina would win 7 of their first 10 games and 14 of their first 20, en route to posting a 24-10-4 record by late December, a far cry from their 11th place finish the season prior. However, if you thought the first half of the season had been impressive enough, Carolina would take things to an even greater level after the new year. Thanks to impressive performances from Brind'Amour and Cole, consistently reliable production from Kaberle and Hedigan, impressive netminding from Gerber, and strong performances from deadline acquisitions Doug Weight and Mark Recchi, Carolina would lose just a single game during the entire month of January and would win 28 of their final 44 games of the year to finish the season first place in the Southeast Division and second in the Eastern Conference with a 52-22-8 record that year. Having returned to the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, the Hurricanes would pick up right where they left off during the regular season and ride their momentum all the way to a championship. Thanks to Staal and Stillman scoring at over a point per game pace for the entire postseason, Brind'Amour and Williams providing consistent secondary scoring, and thanks to the dominant goaltending of rookie netminder Cam Ward, who stole the starting job from Gerber midway through the first round, Carolina would defeat the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games in the finals to clinch the 2006 Stanley Cup. So after missing the playoffs altogether during the previous season, and after losing the following year due to a lockout, thanks to their young guns rising to the occasion, their veteran players bouncing back, a key free agent signing and a hot rookie goaltender, Carolina had just lifted their first championship in franchise history. Don't you just love a happy ending, folks? And that was a look at several NHL teams who went from playoff miss to cup champs. What do you guys think about these quick turnarounds? Was each team's playoff miss simply a fluke, or was their cup win purely down to luck? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Clayton Hallam, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further, and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.